Mr. Lincoln was 6 feet 4 inches high, and when he left the city of his home for Washington, he was 51 years old, having good health and no gray hairs. He was not a pretty man by any means, nor was he an ugly one. He was a homely man, careless of his looks, plain-looking and plain acting. He had no pomp or dignity, so-called. He was a sad-looking man. His melancholy dripped from him as he walked.
Mr. Lincoln stands 6 feet 12 in his socks, which he changes every 10 days. His head is shaped somewhat like a rutabaga, and he swears fluently. His anatomy is composed mostly of bones, and when he walks, he resembles the offspring of a happy marriage between a derrick and a windmill.
None of the artists have caught the expression of this man's face. They've only caught the surface. There is something else there.
In all republics, is there this fatal weakness? Must the government of necessity be too strong for the liberties of its own people, or too weak to maintain its own existence? In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war. The government will not assail you. You can have no conflict without yourselves being the aggressors. You have no oath registered in heaven to destroy the government, while I have the most solemn one to preserve, protect, and defend it. I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break the bonds of affection. Those mystic chords of memory that will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature.
Papa, Ted took my soldiers. Papa, listen to me. Don't worry, Papa, the soldiers will come.
Willie, Willie, Willie.
Any news yet, Nicolay?
Be quiet, Ted, and give me back those soldiers. Papa, help me.
No, sir. General Scott is confident, though, that we can defend Washington.
You can see the rebel flags flying from this window, Papa, right across the river over there. I saw one this morning.
The troops are on the way, sir. It's only 20 miles from the junction to Annapolis. Even if the railroad is cut, they could walk that far.
I begin to believe there is no North. The 7th Regiment is a myth. Rhode Island is not known in our history books any longer. Why don't they come? Why don't they come?
7th Regiment from New York, reporting for duty.
8th Massachusetts.
1st Rhode Island.
5th Massachusetts.
Shine your boots for half a dime. Shine your boots with the Union polish.
1st New Jersey.
3rd Maine.
71st New York.
Sick 'em, boys. Death to the traitors. Shoo 'em straight to the Gulf of Mexico.
1st Michigan.
1st New Hampshire.
Garibaldi Guards.
Through Richmond like a dose of salts.
So large an army as the government now has on foot was never before known, without a soldier in it, but who has taken his place of his own free will.
A reckless and unprincipled tyrant, Abraham Lincoln, regardless of all moral, legal, and constitutional restraints, has thrown his abolition halls among you. All rules of civilized warfare are abandoned. Your honor and that of your wives and daughters, your fortunes and your lives are involved in this momentous contest.
Laddies, the President himself put his hand on my shoulder and said to me, Colonel Ellsworth, you should know that Mr. Lincoln was almost like a father to me back in Springfield. A father to us all now. Colonel Ellsworth, he said, you cannot know how proud I am to see you and your fine company of Zouaves here in Washington. Our country is in safe hands.
Militarily, the North and South resemble nothing so much as armed mobs.
The rebel Congress must not be allowed to meet in Richmond on the 20th of July. By that date, the place must be held by the National Army. On to Richmond!
On to Richmond!
And should we call it Dixie, and Dixie, and Dixie, and should we call it Dixie, we'll fight for the dear old flag. Hold on, Abraham, never say die for your Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam's boys are coming right along, 600,000 strong.
To the father and mother of Colonel Elmer E. Ellsworth. In the untimely loss of your noble son, our affliction here is scarcely less than your own. In the hope that it may be no intrusion upon the sacredness of your sorrow, I have ventured to address you this tribute to the memory of my young friend and your brave and early fallen child. May God give you that consolation which is beyond all earthly powers. A. Lincoln.
I have spent 7 consecutive sleepless nights, Mr. Lincoln. The gloom in this city is funereal, for our dead at Bull Run were many, and they lie unburied yet. On every brow sits sullen, searching black despair. What can I do, Mr. President? If it is best for the country that we make peace with the rebels at once and on their own terms, do not shrink even from that. Yours most sincerely, Horace Greeley.
Believe me, it's the finger of the Almighty in it. Didn't he curse the blacks? And why should he take their part now with those Yankee abolitionists against true white men?
One wild shout of furious resolve to capture Washington City at all and every human hazard. The filthy cage of unclean birds must and will be purified by fire. Our people can take it, and Scott the Ark traitor and Lincoln the Beast cannot combine prevent it.
I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the House to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided.
How many, Mr. Lincoln? How many? How long, Mr. Lincoln? How long? How long the stench of shallow graves carried across the Potomac, mingling with the lilacs of an April evening?
Do not misunderstand the present inaction here. Not a day, not an hour has been lost. Works have been constructed that may almost be called gigantic.
The President has assented to your plan. He thinks it will succeed if you move rapidly. Otherwise, not.
I use the mildest phrase when I say Lincoln is a weak, miserably weak man. His wife is a fool, a laughingstock of the town. Her vulgarity only the more conspicuous in consequence of her damnable airs.
The President directs you to lead your army into East Tennessee. You say it is the heart of the enemy's resources. Then make it the heart of yours.
And I tell you, sir, General McClellan must be replaced immediately. This is not the Army of the Potomac. It is McClellan's bodyguard.
With who?
With who? With anybody. Anybody at all.
Wade, anybody may be all right for you, but I need somebody.
Please do not let him get off without being hurt. God bless you and all with you. Destroy the rebel army if possible.
But, Mr. President, I thought you said it was to be a pardon. But you say here not to be shot until further orders come from me. And you may order him shot next week.
My friend, I see you're not very well acquainted with me. If your son never looks on death until further orders come from me to shoot him, He will live to be a great deal older than Methuselah.
Our losses are heavy. Can hardly hear my instrument.
How is it that Grant, who was behind at Fort Henry, drunk at Donelson, surprised and whipped at Shiloh, and driven back from Oxford, Mississippi, is still in command? Our noble army of the Mississippi is being wasted by the foolish, drunken, stupid Grant. He is a jackass of the original package, a poor stick sober, and he is most of the time half drunk and much of the time idiotically drunk.
I can't spare him. He fights.
I have lost since Stanton's order to draft the sight of one eye entirely and have chronic inflammation in the other. My teeth is all unsound and my palate ain't exactly right. I'm ruptured in 9 places and my body is entirely enveloped with trusses.
To General Hooker, I have heard in such a way as to believe it of your recently saying that both the Army and the government needed a dictator. Of course, it was not for this, but in spite of it, that I have given you command. Only those generals who gain successes can set up dictatorships. What I am asking of you is military success. I will risk the dictatorship. A. Lincoln.
It has been rumored that within the president's own family there are secessionist spies. It is known that Mrs. Lincoln has a mulatto dressmaker as her best friend, and a sister with secessionist sympathies, and 2 brothers in the rebel army.
I seem to be the scapegoat for both North and South.
It was announced yesterday that the usual Saturday receptions at the White House and the levee on Thursday would be omitted on account of the illness of the second son of the president, an interesting lad of about 8 years of age, who has been lying dangerously ill for the last 3 days.
Tell Taddy that his and Willie's dog is alive and kicking and doing well. He stays mostly at John E. Rolls with his boys, who are about the age that Tad and Willie were when they left for Washington. Your residence here is kept in good order. Mr. Tilton has no children to ruin things. Oh, dear God, God, not Willie too. Please, dear God, not Willie too.
My usual trouble in this room, my office, is from the bugs. Oftener humbugs, but at this writing, 10 p.m. Sunday night, the thing is reversed, and little bugs are the pest. The gas lights over my desk are burning brightly, and the windows of the room are open, and all bugdom outside is... The President? Is everything all right?
Well, Nicolay, they've taken my boy. He's really gone.
Yes, we'll rally round the flag, boys will rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
As to the politics of Washington, the most striking thing is the absence of personal loyalty to the president. It does not exist. He has no admirers here, no enthusiastic supporters. We went for a rail splitter, and we have got one.
It is said an Eastern monarch once charged his wise men to invent him a sentence to be ever in view, and which should be true and appropriate at all times and in all situations. They presented him with the words, "And this too shall pass away. And this too shall pass away."
Shouting the battle cry of freedom. shouting the battle cry of